Today, we are diving deep into one of the most dramatic, most foundational moments in the entire Hebrew Bible, the giving of the covenant at Mount Sinai. We're going to walk through the incredible events laid out in the book of Exodus, chapter 19.
But before we jump into the story, let's start with this massive question. What does it actually mean to meet God? I mean, really think about that. For the Israelites, this wasn't some philosophical idea. It was about to become a very real, very terrifying, and totally life-altering experience, one that would shape them as a people forever.
All right, so our story begins right as one journey ends and a much bigger, much more intimidating one begins. The people of Israel have traveled a long way, and now they've finally reached their destination, the awesome, imposing Mount Sinai.
The book of Exodus, chapter 19, verse 1, sets the scene for us perfectly. It tells us it's the third month since they left Egypt, and they've just arrived in the wilderness of Sinai. Then, verse 2 of Exodus chapter 19 adds that they pitched their camp right there, right in front of the mountain. And this wasn't just some random stop, because then we get the moment that kicks everything off. The book of Exodus chapter 19, verse 3 says, "And Moses went up unto God." That simple act, Moses climbing that mountain, begins a conversation that is literally going to change the world.
Okay, this is where we get to the absolute heart of it. This isn't just a casual meeting. This is a proposal. God is about to make an incredible, a truly extraordinary offer to the entire nation of Israel. So God starts by reminding them what He's already done, of His immense power and His personal care for them. In the book of Exodus, chapter 19, verse 4, He says this, "Ye have seen what I did unto the Egyptians, and how I bare you on eagle's wings, and brought you unto myself." I mean, what an image. This isn't just pretty language. It's a powerful reminder that their whole relationship is built on this incredible act of salvation.
And that leads right into the offer itself. In the book of Exodus, chapter 19, verse 5, God lays out the deal. He says if they obey His voice and keep His covenant, they'll become a peculiar treasure to Him. Then the book of Exodus, chapter 19, verse 6, builds on that promise. They won't just be a treasure, they will be a kingdom of priests and an holy nation. This is a huge calling, a destiny to be set apart from everyone else for a completely sacred purpose. So God has made His offer, but, a covenant is a two-way street. It takes two parties to agree. So the big question now is, how are the people going to respond to this?
Well, their answer is immediate and it is decisive. The book of Exodus, chapter 19, verse 7, tells us that Moses came down from the mountain, he gathered the elders, and he laid out everything the Lord had said. And then in the book of Exodus, chapter 19, verse 8, we hear their response. All the people answered together with one voice, "All that the Lord hath spoken, we will do." Wow, a powerful unanimous agreement. Just like that, the covenant is accepted.
Now, what happens next is so interesting. God doesn't just, take their word for it and move on. No, as we read in the book of Exodus, chapter 19, verse 9, He plans a demonstration. He tells Moses that he's going to come in a thick clouds that the people themselves can hear him speaking. Why? So that their faith in Moses as his messenger will be rock solid forever. This is all about establishing undeniable, unforgettable authority. What follows next is this period of really intense preparation. You see, you don't just casually show up for a meeting with the creator of the universe. There are rules, there are rituals, and there's a very, very real sense of danger when you're about to approach something so holy. God gives Moses a list of very specific instructions. First, in the book of Exodus chapter 19, verse 10, the Lord says, "Go unto the people and sanctify them today and tomorrow." Then, verse 11 of Exodus chapter 19 adds the next step, "And let them wash their clothes, all to get ready for the third day." And then comes the most critical command of all, from the book of Exodus chapter 19, verse 12, to set a boundary all the way around the mountain that no one, and I mean no one, is allowed to cross. And the penalty for crossing that line? It is absolute. The end of the book of Exodus chapter 19, verse 12 gives this terrifyingly blunt warning. "Whosoever touches the mount shall be surely put to death." Verse 13 then clarifies that this goes for both people and animals, and that the punishment would be to be stoned or shot through with a dart. This makes it crystal clear. The separation between the holy and the ordinary is, quite literally, a matter of life and death.
Okay, everything has been building to this. This is the climax of the entire chapter. The preparations are done. The boundary has been set. The third day is here, and with it comes the awesome, the terrifying descent
of God.
The book of Exodus, chapter 19, verse 16, starts with this simple, almost cinematic phrase, "And it came to pass on the third day in the morning." That's it. That's the signal. The waiting is over, and what's about to happen is a complete and total assault on the senses.
Yeah, this isn't a quiet, gentle arrival. The book of Exodus, chapter 19, verse 16 describes thunders and lightnings and a thick cloud upon the mount, and the voice of the trumpet exceeding loud, so that all the people that was in the camp trembled. And if that wasn't enough, the book of Exodus, chapter 19, verse 18 adds that the entire mountain was altogether on a smoke, and the whole mount quaked greatly. This is just an overwhelming display of raw cosmic power.
And here it is, the defining moment, the central image of this entire incredible event, stated so powerfully in the book of Exodus chapter 19, verse 18, "The Lord descended upon it in fire." Fire! That's the visual manifestation of God's holy presence on Sinai, a symbol of purity, of power, of judgment that would be seared into the memory of this nation forever.
But even in the middle of this spectacular chaos, God's final instructions are all about order and separation. In the book of Exodus, chapter 19, verse 20, God calls Moses right to the top of the mountain. But then, as we see in verses 21 and 24, he immediately sends him back down with one more urgent warning. Tell the people not to break through the boundary to get a better look, lest many of them perish. Only Moses and his brother Aaron are allowed to come up. That sacred boundary had to be maintained, no matter what.
So when you put it all together, think about this. The law, the very thing that would define Israel's entire future, wasn't delivered in a quiet sermon. It arrived in the middle of fire and smoke, earthquakes and the deafening blast of a divine trumpet. So that leads us to a final question to chew on. If this was the beginning of God's law for his people, what does its terrifying, awesome delivery teach us about how incredibly important it is and about the nature of the lawgiver himself?